This video is dedicated to my patron and friend from the United States, P. Bear. Dear P. Bear, you asked me to make a video on this topic, and I fulfilled your request. Thank you for your spectacular support. Greetings, my friends. In December 1990, in Moscow, an unusual invention of specialists from the Scientific Research Institute of Radio Engineering was shown to the members of a closed commission of the Ministry of Defense of the USSR. It was a small device that generated artificial lightning. The military was amazed that the energy of real lightning was conserved in this bank. The Soviet military immediately realized that now unprecedented prospects were opening up for them to create a fundamentally new weapon that would be able to solve strategically tasks and ensure guaranteed protection of the country. My friends, the history of the creation of plasma weapons in Russia is still little known due to great secrecy, and even now, in this video, I can tell you only a few facts regarding plasma weapons because everything else is a state secret. In February 1956, an unexpected call rang in Nikita Khrushchev's office. It was the director of the Institute for Physical Problems, Academician Pyotr Kapitsa. He asked Nikita Khrushchev to stop oppress scientists who are engaged in promising areas of science. But the head of the USSR, Nikita Khrushchev, abruptly interrupted the conversation and hung up the phone. Despite this, in 1956, Academician Pyotr Kapitsa and his collaborators made a real breakthrough in science. For the first time in the world, a stable plasma filament was obtained in a microwave generator. In the mid-1950s of the last century, in the USSR, at the Institute of Atomic Energy, was created an experimental setup, Tokamak, a toroidal chamber with a magnetic coil. By controlling the movement of hot plasma, Academician Pyotr Kapitsa strove to launch a thermonuclear reaction like in the sun and obtain a unique source of electricity. In the same 1956, the USSR successfully launched a nuclear-powered ballistic missile. This made it possible to strike back at the territory of the United States, which was prepared at any time to implement plans for the atomic bombing of industrial centers of the USSR. The protection of the capital region was provided by two anti-missile defense rings. The network of radar stations that surrounded Moscow controlled the airspace within a radius of 300 kilometers. Unique anti-aircraft missile systems, Berkut, could hit any attacking target. It seemed that the USSR had acquired a reliable heavenly shield. However, in November 1960, the KGB managed to find out that the United States was planning to equip 9 submarines with the latest intercontinental ballistic missiles, Polaris, with a range of more than 2,000 kilometers, which would allow American submarines to strike at the USSR, far from the anti-submarine defense lines. It became clear that under the new conditions, only early detection of American missile launches could provide the USSR with the possibility of retaliating. The creation of a new radar system for early detection of launches was entrusted to the Minsk Institute of Radio Technology. Soviet scientist Rimily Avramenko became the chief designer of the new radar system for early detection of launches. So, in March 1961, for the first time in the world, a Soviet anti-ballistic missile destroyed a warhead of the ballistic missile. This successful experiment determined the path of development of the Soviet strategic forces and opened a new stage in the missile confrontation between the USSR and the United States. Meanwhile, Academician Pyotr Kapitsa continued his research in the field of plasma energy and sincerely believed that it was plasma energy that should become the path of the development of Soviet strategic forces. It is worth noting that the outstanding Soviet scientist Rimily Avramenko agreed on this with Pyotr Kapitsa. Thus, in 1964, scientists proposed to shoot down ballistic missiles using artificial ball lightning. Upon collision with the object, the plasma formation plasmoid was supposed to act similarly to a uranium projectile and release a charge of destructive energy during the explosion. Plasma weapons are a whole complex. Plasmoid is a means of destruction, and its starting device is a pulse magnetic hydrodynamic generator. The generator accelerates the plasma in a magnetic field to the speed of light and sets its direction of motion. The flight of the plasma charge is corrected by a laser. The first plasmoid, which was created by Academician Kapitsa and Avramenko, was about the size of a pea, but at the same time, possessed all the properties of ball lightning. With the help of these developments, the USSR decided to improve its global missile attack warning system. One of the first projects on the inner radius of defense provided for the use of plasma combat components to destroy aerospace targets. Mobile impulse magnetohydrodynamic generators could effectively hit objects using plasmoids and instantly switch from target to target. Of course, this is a completely different plasma than a thermonuclear plasma, in which the temperature is 100 million degrees. In the plasma created by Soviet scientists, the temperature reached only 5,000 degrees. In 1970, government of the Soviet Union issued a decree on the creation of plasma weapons. All the leading enterprises of the military-industrial complex of the USSR were involved in this grandiose project, the cost of which was not inferior to the space program for the exploration of the moon. It was a time of the highest dawn of the Soviet economy. In 1974, an experimental setup that had no analogues in the world was launched at the Moscow Scientific Research Institute of Radio Engineering. It was a two-mirror open resonator, door 2. So, Soviet scientists were the first in the world to create controllable ball lightning. In a vacuum chamber, simulating the atmosphere at different altitudes, a continuous ultra-high frequency of the radiation with a power of 20 megawatts was focused, and a stable plasma formation appeared. By varying the pumping parameters of specific electromagnetic pulses, it was possible to regulate the shape and nature of plasma discharges. My friends, now, for the first time, you see unique footage of experiments to create laboratory plasmoids. The fundamental discovery, which was made by the scientists of the Moscow Scientific Research Institute of Radio Engineering and Institute of Physics and Technology of Academy of Sciences of the USSR, allowed mankind to look into the future. According to experts, using the energy of plasma, even old weapons can be endowed with unprecedented fighting qualities. For example, if a shell flying in a ballistic corridor is covered with a plasma coating, then the shock wave is breaking up, air resistance drops, and the flight speed increases tens of times. This discovery also made it clear to the scientists of the USSR that plasma guns, in the future, could become the main type of weaponry for radio-electronic warfare troops. In April 1982, an unusually bright northern lights flashed over the Kola Peninsula. For several hours, radio communication interruptions were recorded along the entire length of the Northern Sea route. The incident was immediately reported to the Minister of Defense of the USSR, Dmitry Ustinov. But he reacted calmly to this incident. The fact is, the Kola Peninsula was a testing ground for one of the most secret products of the Soviet defense complex. On this peninsula, Soviet scientists managed to create the world's most powerful pulsed magnetohydrodynamic generator, Sakhalin. Later, in the Soviet Union, a whole family of magnetohydrodynamic generators was created, the radiation power of which made it possible to fight air targets and be an effective means of sea and underground reconnaissance. Later, the outstanding Soviet scientist Rimily Avramenko proposed a fundamentally new solution to the problems of anti-missile defense. A cloud of highly ionized air is formed in the focus of radiation from ground-based components of plasma weapons at an altitude of 50 kilometers. The controlled plasmoid heats the atmospheric temperature, the air density drops, thereby the flying missile loses its support, leaves its trajectory, and collapses. The plasma formation affects ballistic missiles like a concrete wall to a racing car. Subsequent experiments with plasma led to an amazing result. It turned out that with the help of plasma formations, it was also possible to effectively fight against false targets. As it turned out, plasmoids removed heavy targets from the trajectory, and light objects made of foil were simply burned. The USSR was closer than ever to the creation of an advanced plasma weapons complex, guaranteeing 100% protection against missile threats. Unfortunately, due to the collapse of the USSR, funding for the creation of plasma weapons was interrupted. But Russian scientists for several years, without receiving a salary, continued to study the amazing properties of the plasma. In 1992, the first firing tests of plasma weapons took place at the artillery practice polygon, Vladimir 30, in the strictest secrecy. Special ground generators focused on a plasma corridor, in which a carefully targeted artillery shell was flying. Under the influence of plasma, the shell changed its flight trajectory and moved away from the target. The results of these tests were for a long time marked top secret. According to experts, today, Russia occupies a leading place in the development of plasma. It is thanks to this that Russia was the first in the world to master hypersonic technologies. In February 2000, a promising Russian stealth fighter, MiG-144, took off. But even back then, Russian scientists realized that for a strategic victory in an air duel, everything would be decided by hypersonic speeds. As it turned out, the revolution in aerodynamics and aviation can be made with the help of the so-called guiding plasmoids. Russian scientists have proposed to equip aircraft with special on-board devices that will create a plasma coating around the aircraft. At the moment, Russia is intensively working in this direction, which will allow using plasma to reduce the resistance during flight for any aircraft, which will subsequently make it possible to create an apparatus of an ideal shape. The first in the world who discovered the possibilities of plasma aerodynamics was the Soviet scientist Rimily Avramenko. Russian scientists are actively using and developing the ideas of Rimily Avramenko. And now, seeing how Russia has overtaken all countries of the world in the field of newest weapons, it becomes obvious that in the field of plasma weapons, Russia also will continue to hold the first place in the world.